Welcome. Thanks for joining me. I'm Christopher Brown, osteopathic physician, and this is the truth about vitality. For most of us, vitality remains a great mystery. It would be simpler if life were like the old Popeye cartoon. Whenever Popeye, the sailor man, needed to save his girlfriend Olive, he would eat a can of spinach and be infused with strength and vigor within seconds. But in the real world, cans of spinach don't produce results like that. Vitality seems to be something that cannot be bottled or canned. In fact, it proves to be difficult to define at all. If you're listening to this right now, presumably you have some vitality already. But what is that exactly? What does that mean? You can try and go through life without ever investigating what vitality is, and ride the wave of this life until it stops. But it's more likely that you'll be confronted with major challenges, and will have to learn about it on the fly, out of necessity. And hopefully for you, you'll look in the right place for it. You are bound to get sick at some point in your life, for example. Or someone you love may get sick, and you'll have to learn how to heal. You may have to make difficult decisions that seem to have no right answer. Maybe you're not living the life you're capable of, or the life you dreamed of, and you feel small and trapped. Perhaps you're suffering every day. Or maybe you have burning spiritual questions that need answering. For any of these pursuits and many others, you'll need to tap into the storehouse of life energy and creativity. In other words, you're going to have to access your vitality, and you won't be able to reach for a can of spinach to do it. It will require a separate kind of knowledge. This is the knowledge we're going to bring to light. But to pursue this mythical beast of vitality, wherever it leads, we'll have to update our worldview as we go. Just like in any hero's story, we have to allow for a certain inner transformation. We can't expect to come upon this most precious knowledge with the same limited frame of mind we've been used to. In particular, we'll have to develop our sensory abilities to be able to perceive the world in ways we didn't know were possible. And we have to allow for the possibility that our vitality is part of something much larger than we previously expected. Thomas Edison, the famous American inventor from the 1800s, was interested in the topic of vitality. Edison was the creator of the light bulb and the movie camera. He experimented with how to use life energies to help him solve problems and come up with new creative ideas. And he found an unusual way to do it. He was said to only sleep 4 hours a night, but he would take naps during the day. And during these naps, he would do something unusual. He would try and doze off holding metal balls in his hands, so that right as he went unconscious into sleep, his hands would go limp, and he would drop the metal balls to the floor with a bang, waking him up. In that moment, he would try to record his thoughts. Edison realized that he became creative right at the moment between sleeping and waking, and that thoughts would come to him that he would not have had during his waking hours. I can vouch personally for the effectiveness of Edison's approach. During my college days, I studied literature, and I didn't have the best study habits, but I did have a method to my essay writing. So I made it a point to find a good spot alone in the library, and I would lay my books out on the table before me and open them to various pages. Then I'd set my head down on the books and doze off. And I found I would often hover in this no man's land between sleeping and waking, and I would observe my essay writing itself in my mind. Then I would pop my head up and write out everything I could remember. Many of us will recognize this state that Edison is speaking of. It happens to meditators as well. When they sit down to meditate and their mind starts to de-excite, suddenly they'll be filled with creative impulses and great ideas, and will have to get up and write those things down on a pad of paper during their meditation. For most people, we know the feeling of dozing off in bed right before we go unconscious. If we catch it, we feel this wonderful bliss feeling in which we've forgotten about our problems. And often we have a feeling like we have no body, like we are just floating. Edison was onto something. He knew that something special happens when we shift out of our normal waking state of repetitive thinking, but stay alert so that we don't quite fall asleep. In this in-between state, there's a portal of some kind to creativity and to a different perceptual state. As we'll see, what lies behind Edison's creative trick is just the beginning of a massive opening into the realm of vitality. The truth is, in order to perceive vitality directly and know what it's really all about, we have to shift into a new state of consciousness. This new state of consciousness is not sleeping. It's not dreaming. And it's not the everyday thinking state that we're in when we go about our day. This new state is a condition in which we're awake and alert, but not thinking. It's a state of stillness. It's in this state that we have heightened perceptual abilities and can access our vitality. At first glance, changing our consciousness state in this way may seem like a daunting task, but the good news for us is that we already know all about this process. In fact, this method of entering into a new state of consciousness in order to reveal our inner vital forces is not only familiar to us all, it's our favorite all-time subject. It's the basis for our favorite movies, books, and superheroes. It's in the fun stories we read our children before bed. It's on our Happy Meal containers at McDonald's. We ride roller coasters at Universal Studios and Disneyland based entirely on this theme. This process is the central aspect of all the important myth stories of our culture. To see what I mean, we can choose any of our culture's popular stories. But let's start with The Wizard of Oz. What happens to Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz? The movie version opens with everyday scenes in rural Kansas. We see little Dorothy worrying about her dog Toto, and we see her running along some dirt roads. This is her known world, her familiar worldview. And it's filmed in black and white. Of course, soon enough, here comes the storm. A tornado strikes. Dorothy runs for cover into her house, but the twister blows open a window that breaks off the wall and hits her in the head, knocking her unconscious. Right away, she's transported through a dream state into a new world. In this new world of Oz, there are vivid colors. There are magical powers she doesn't understand at first, like witchcraft. She encounters new creatures and characters that she never knew about before. It's in this newfound world that she has her adventures and ultimately discovers her inner power to click her heels and return home. In other words, she learns how to control her own destiny. That movie was made in 1939, and it's still very popular today. Why is this movie so mesmerizing for us? In The Wizard of Oz, we see clearly that for Dorothy, To have access to her inner life powers, she has to change her consciousness first. In dramatic fashion, Dorothy literally gets knocked into a new state of consciousness by a flying window, which causes her to have a new scope of perception, which is represented by the Land of Oz. Change of consciousness happens first, then her vital forces become apparent to her. The Star Wars series, as another example, is one of our generation's most well-known myth stories. Every kid knows about Luke Skywalker and the Force. It seems to be as popular now as it was 40 years ago. The first episode, A New Hope, was released in 1977. In the beginning of the movie, when we first meet Luke Skywalker, he's involved in everyday activities on his home planet of Tatooine, just as Dorothy was in Kansas. Then, the evil empire makes its appearance into his life, and he is quickly put in touch with the old retired Jedi, Obi-Wan Kenobi. Luke doesn't know about the Force yet, but soon enough he's given a lightsaber to practice with. He tries wielding the lightsaber against a little robot, shooting lasers at him, and fails to protect himself. The old sage Obi-Wan puts a blindfolding helmet on him and instructs him to essentially change his consciousness level. This time, says Obi-Wan, let go your conscious self and act on instinct. Stretch out with your feelings. On the second try, Luke is successful, and he says in amazement, "You know, I did feel something." "That's good," says Obi-Wan. "You have taken your first step into a larger world." Here, at the center of our culture's most popular story, is the lesson that changing into a new, expanded consciousness state based on instinct and feeling allows for the perception of the vitality of the universe, called the Force. And that this new perception puts you in touch with a, quote, larger world. Harry Potter follows the same model. The first book was published in 1997. The epic story opens with Harry in a non-perfect, mundane living situation, just as the other heroes above. Then peculiar things start happening around him, and he encounters the wizard giant Hagrid. Harry doesn't know his powers yet, so Hagrid has to introduce him to this new world. To get to this new world by himself and get to Hogwarts School, Harry has to enter the magical train station through platform 9 3/4 at King's Cross Station in London. But that entry point to the world of magic is a brick wall that ordinary people know only as a brick wall. To get through that brick wall, Harry has to dispel with his old belief that running into a wall will cause him to bump his head. In this instance and many similar instances along the way, he's forced to let go of his old, outdated worldview in favor of trusting a new set of sensory experience. He takes a deep breath and runs directly at the brick wall and ends up getting transported to the world of magic. It's in this world that he gets to develop his inner powers that we all know about. We could go on because all these popular stories have the same theme. Why are we spending time on this? Even these pop culture stories are pointing out that to know ourselves and to find those powers that reside inside of us, we need to get out of our routine, mundane way of life that is characterized by not being aware of much. We have to expand our consciousness. When we do this, we're able to perceive a whole new world that we didn't even know existed, that remains out of reach for those who cling to their old familiar worldview. How is this relevant for us, though, who are real people, not made-up characters? The reason is that if you try to find vitality with your old mindset and your old level of perception, you won't find it. The old mindset is that ordinary, unfulfilling routine that each of the above heroes find themselves in at the start of their stories. The new world they enter is a place of expanded sensory experience and immense power. This is so fascinating to us because we know the truth of it. We know that there's an untapped world of experience in us, in real life, that we can access. This world that is within all of us and is available to all of us is the place in which we can experience our vitality. And what is that vitality? To describe what vitality actually is, we have to do what our heroes do and leave our comfort zone. We have to start the adventure of expanding our sensory experience. If we can step out of our everyday thought patterns and get into a state in which we can perceive a high degree of subtlety, we start to notice something. There's a vibratory quality to the world. Everything within us and outside us has a vibration to it, like a soft buzzing. Everything is humming and alive. Even things we don't consider to be alive, like air, dirt, water, and light. Also, this field of vibration has a pulsatory quality to it, as if it's breathing. The whole world within us and outside us is humming and breathing. This vibratory field then sets to motion in so many different ways. In a living human body, the field will move like a current through the body. It's this current that is the animating force that brings us to life. It has within it the intelligence that makes earth matter into a complex living organism. And it's this current that we call vitality. Obviously, when we go through our daily life, we aren't aware of it, because to be aware of it requires us to be in a certain perceptual state. But it's not theoretical. Anyone can perceive it and can watch it in real time, doing its work through the body. So when we say someone or something has high vitality, we mean that the vibratory field of nature is moving through that thing and expressing itself through that thing unobstructed. For a human, that feels like enthusiasm, creativity, health, energy, and fulfillment. When those motions get obstructed, we experience fatigue, illness, and negative emotions. Decades ago, before I knew much about this topic, I had a number of spontaneous run-ins with vitality. One memorable experience came in my early 20s. I was going through some intense health issues at the time and was deep in a healing journey. And I remember cooking in the kitchen of my apartment in Los Angeles. I was looking out the window and noticed a bird on a tree. There was a slight breeze. It was a warm day. If there were anybody there watching this scene, it would have looked like the most uninteresting event in the world. And then all of a sudden, I felt a shift in my body. I became very still. What happened was the space around the bird outside started to become alive. Not the bird itself, but the space around it. It was like the whole environment could see me. In fact, it felt like me. It was alive, vibrating. And then that feeling came through my body as well. It was incredibly still. And my body felt prickly, but in a pleasant way. Like my own presence became the same as the environment. In that moment, I had no illness at all. I'd forgotten about my health problems altogether. Instead, I was filled with a sense of complete health. Part of me had linked up with that buoyant vibratory field of the environment, and there was an unmistakable quality of peace and balance within my system. I remember thinking afterwards, wow, that is my health. That stillness thing. Whatever that was, that's what I'm looking for. Of course, what had happened was I had made contact with the vibratory field within myself. And I've spent the rest of my life, including my whole professional career, interacting with that field and allowing its expression in me and my loved ones and patients in any way I can. That experience and others like it saved my life. They were the initial orientation of a compass that showed me the way towards health. That particular moment, looking out the window, was a spontaneous foray into a different consciousness state. This was a consciousness state of stillness, in which I was able to perceive subtle motions in myself and in the environment. There is nothing special about it. We have all had experiences like this to one degree or another, even if we haven't recognized it yet. They usually occur when we're in nature. The timing of that one just hit me hard. And people have known about this invisible sensory landscape for thousands of years. It is nothing new. And they've known that to access it requires a change of consciousness. It is well known in our culture as well, through history and up to modern times. In the 1800s and 1900s, there was a group of brave American doctors who made a science of assessing and accessing this consciousness state of vitality. They were interested in improving their perceptual abilities in order to help sick people. They found they could directly communicate with the healing forces in nature. These were the early osteopaths. They went further to develop their perceptual abilities than maybe anyone else of record in the history of the United States. And they discovered that they could feel in precise detail the vibratory field of vitality. Osteopathy is a method of healing performed by physicians in which they use their hands to adjust the structures of the body. It's based on knowledge of anatomy. But what these osteopaths found as they got better and better at feeling living human anatomy is that there's a whole world of motions and textures and vibratory fields that are happening all at once in the body. It's a whole world that someone from the outside would not even know existed. And all these motions and functions in the body are coordinated and intelligent, and they respond to outside attention. So an osteopath can interact with them and help guide them towards healing diseased and injured body tissues. These motions are the motions of vitality, and they're so responsive that they respond to a single thought. William Sutherland, a well-known osteopath in the early 1900s, called these vital motions the breath of life. His teacher, Andrew Taylor Still, the founder of osteopathy, described vitality by saying, "Life surely is a very finely prepared substance, which is the all-moving force of nature, or that force that moves all nature from worlds to atoms." But if you take someone off the street or a student, for example, and ask them to put their hands on a patient and see what they feel, they'll hardly feel anything at all. They won't feel anything resembling the breath of life or the all-moving force of nature. If they touched a patient's arm, they'll just feel skin and bone and a little warmth. So how does a person go from being able to perceive only the most superficial qualities to being able to perceive the expansive vibratory field of vitality? Dr. Still was quite aware of this issue because it was the same issue for him and is the same issue for every student and any one of us who's on the road to improving our perception. We all start not being able to feel much. So Dr. Still's instructions were very particular. If you want to go behind the veil, he said, if you want to penetrate the mystery of what this life is, you have to leave your old world behind. You have to let go of your attachment to the intellect. The old world is the world you know so well. It's the world of constant thinking. Dr. Still said, initially, we use the intellect rigorously in our study of anatomy and physiology. But when we interact directly with the body, we have to leave all this behind. He says, quote, once in the operating rooms, you are in a place where printed books are known no more forever. Your own native ability with nature's book are all that command respect in this field of labor. Here you lay aside the long words and use your mind in deep and silent earnestness. Drink deep from the eternal fountain of reason. Penetrate the forests of that law whose beauties are life and death. Close quote. If we want to penetrate the forests of life and death, we have to leave the printed books behind and the long words. These items are of no use to us. We have to leave behind the cumbersome baggage of the intellect. These thoughts are burdens that weigh us down on our adventures. And when we use our mind in this way, what happens to us? When we lay aside the printed books and long words and become silent, face to face with nature's book, what happens? What happens is we enter the world of heightened perceptual awareness. Things appear to us that we would never have imagined. Still writes, quote, solemnity takes possession of the mind. A smile of love runs over the face. The ebbs and tides of the great ocean of reason, whose depths have never been fathomed, swell to your surging brain. You eat and drink, and as you stand in silent amazement, suns appear where you never saw a star, brilliant with the rays of God's wisdom. This is the invisible world of the vital forces. Here is where vitality lives, in silence, where we couldn't even see a star before in our previous state of awareness. Now, brilliant suns appear, bringing God's wisdom. They were there the whole time. We just couldn't see them behind the veil of thinking. Ralph Waldo Emerson is one of America's most famous and highly regarded philosophers. He was writing before osteopathy was created. But listen to what he says. He found the formula to unlocking vitality as well. And it's the same formula that Dr. Still found. In 1836, he published an essay called Nature. In it, he writes these lines, quote, I become a transparent eyeball. I am nothing. I see all. The currents of the universal being circulate through me. I am part or particle of God. The whole formula is here. If you want to have the currents of vitality circulate through you, you have to make a shift. You must become transparent. And what does that mean? It means you let your mind become still, like clear water on a lake. Then light can pass through you without obstruction. Thoughts, judgments, and emotions are turbulence in the water of the lake. They disturb the water and stir up sediment. They make the light distorted as it passes through. A still mind is a mind that is capable of vivid perception. This is why Emerson refers to the state of clarity he found as a transparent eyeball that can see all. Emerson chose his words carefully. He knew about this hundreds of years ago. Like so many others knew, it is here in plain sight. Let me pause for one moment and acknowledge something here. I know we aren't used to thinking about vitality in these terms. I realize that. Most of us will think of vitality in other ways, such as simply having more energy or feeling healthier. So when people consider how to have more energy or feel healthier, they think of things like taking vitamins and supplements or reducing fat in their diet. If you were to go on the internet and search for how to boost your vitality, you'll see a long list of search results that give tips on how to, quote, boost your energy. These articles tell us to decrease stress, change sleep patterns, adjust caffeine levels, and limit alcohol. These types of recommendations are what we typically hear about regarding vitality. Vitamins, supplements, stress reduction, sleep, food, avoiding toxins. Basically, we tend to think of vitality as something that happens if we have the right lifestyle habits and take the right holistic medical advice. But what we mean by vitality in this talk is something different. It's the vibratory intelligence that is moving through us that makes all these lifestyle habits work in the first place. Bulletproof coffee, waking up early, cold plunges, managing your dopamine levels, and all the popular biohacking recommendations only mean anything at all if there's an intelligence there making use of them. If you give vitamins and supplements to a rock, it will have no use for them. If you tell a dead person to wake up early in the morning and do a power hour of affirmations and manifestations, they will have no use for that advice. To know the source of vitality, we must know about the intelligence that is there in the body in the first place. There's a life there already that can perform miracles and make use of what we do, what we think, and what we eat. It is there organizing our fluids from the moment of conception. In Book 2 of Genesis in the Old Testament, we learn that God made man of dust from the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living being. We want to know about this breath of life. The Bible doesn't say that God breathed into his nostrils bulletproof coffee. It's not the affirmations or the vitamins or the drugs or the gadgets or the protein powders from Whole Foods that made Adam a living being. It was the breath of life. This is what we're discussing now. Religious and spiritual cultures around the world have known about the human breath of life for thousands of years. And they've known that it's an expression of the vital forces that are moving through all of nature. In our culture's central creation myth, these animating forces make an appearance within the first few sentences of the story, prior to Adam rising from the dust. In Genesis, Book 1 of the Old Testament, we read these legendary lines. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. What is the Spirit of God? Why is that particular term used? In Hebrew, the word used in these lines is spelled R-U-A-C-H, ruach. It means spirit and wind and breath. What is this wind or breath of God that moves upon the waters at the beginning of creation? The Oxford English Dictionary defines spirit as an animating or vital principle. That's what spirit means. Spirit is the animating force of nature. In religious terms, it's the part of God that moves through the world, bringing it to life. It's the part of God that emerges from the unmanifest, transcendent aspect of God into motion in the world. That's why it says the Spirit of God moved. And this is why the word for spirit is the same word for wind and breath. In Christianity and Islam, this animating force is called the Holy Spirit. The Arabic word for spirit is almost the same as the Hebrew, spelled R-U-H. It's the aspect of God that moves within us and communicates with us. It is sometimes called the word or the command or the voice, which all capture its vibrational quality. The ancient Greeks called the animating force pneuma, which means spirit or breath. The Vedic tradition from India called it prana, which means life force or breath or wind. The Chinese call the movement of universal substance in motion qi. Volumes could be written about each of these concepts in their own traditions alone. But for our purposes, we want to acknowledge that people from all over the world and from all over time knew about the animating force of nature, named it, and made it central to their understanding of the universe. Each tradition also recognizes that accessing the Spirit requires a certain state of consciousness. We have to leave our old familiar world behind and enter a new world of heightened perception, a new consciousness. It's akin to starting a new life. In John 3 of the New Testament, Jesus says, quote, "That which is born of flesh is flesh, and that which is born of spirit is spirit. Do not be amazed that I said to you, you must be born again. The wind blows where it wishes, and you hear the sounds of it, but do not know where it comes from and where it is going. So is everyone who is born of the Spirit." Being born of the Spirit means we have awakened a new life within us. This is the life of heightened perception, where we are able to perceive the subtle motions and vibrations in the environment and feel their power within us. These forces, according to Jesus, are perceived as wind. He specifically says that we don't know where this wind comes from or where it is going, but we can hear it, we can perceive it. This is the experience of the Spirit, and it's the experience of vitality. Meister Eckhart, the medieval Christian mystic, got quite explicit about how to awaken this life of spirit within us. He was writing his sermons in the 1200s and 1300s. He wrote extensively about his method of perception. He described God's communication with him as the Word and as something that he could hear. In one sermon, he writes that the person who looks for God, quote, must come to a forgetting and an unknowing. There must be a stillness and a silence for this word to make itself heard. We cannot serve this word better than in stillness and in silence. There we can hear it, and there too we will understand it aright, in the unknowing. To him who knows nothing, it appears and reveals itself. These lines are incredible. At first, his description of how to perceive the Holy Spirit may sound counterintuitive. He says only in stillness and silence do we hear. Silence and perceiving sound are opposites. So how can we hear something in silence? His words make sense if we understand what stillness and silence refer to. These are actually qualities of the mind. A still mind and a silent mind is a mind that is not engaged in thoughts. It is a mind that is transparent. He's referring to a consciousness state. In this consciousness state, our perception is not disturbed by thought forms. We're able to perceive without distortion. This is how to become born of the Spirit. Meister Eckhart describes this state of the mind as knowing nothing. When the intellect stops producing thoughts, a purity of perception takes place. When thoughts go away, we have clean awareness, a clean lens. Our senses are primed for the subtlest movement and the subtlest sound. Then, without effort, into that field of awareness comes the animating forces of nature, the wind of the Spirit, or the Word of God. As we go through our daily lives, this unseen world of the animating forces can remain hidden. Many of us may not even know it's there at all. And there are a number of reasons for this. The first reason why the world of vitality remains hidden for people is that it's so subtle. When we're going through our daily lives, going to the market, going to work, having conversations, or worrying about the future, we don't notice subtleties. We're blind to them. The perception of vitality is more subtle than you think. It's like trying to hear what it sounds like when an insect breathes. It's that delicate. But when you feel it, it's so powerful it will knock you off your feet. One drop of that experience changes your life in an instant. To be in a state of mind in which we can have that perception requires that we get still within ourselves and stop that incessant mind noise. In our society, we don't practice being still. We're not used to it. The second reason why we remain ignorant of vitality is that most of our trusted institutions are also ignorant of it. Government, public health institutions, research science, and modern medicine don't recognize such a thing as vitality. A doctor, for example, won't hear one mention of vitality in their medical education or during their time in practice. Neither the word nor the concept is likely to come up. To test this, you can go into your doctor's office today and ask them to evaluate your vitality and see how they respond. They won't have any idea what you're talking about. It's not the case that physicians don't have access to vitality. They have the same access and capabilities that any of us have. The issue is they're beholden to a massive thought system. Modern medicine is a thought system that is based on making quantitative data out of the human body and then analyzing and organizing that data. It's a very effective system when it comes to emergency care, but it's not a system that perceives health. Modern medicine uses quantitative markers and flowcharts to inform their therapeutics. Perceiving health is not related to these methods, because to perceive health means to have an experience of the life force that is operating in someone. And having this experience within oneself comes from being in a state of stillness. This state of stillness is not achieved through intellectual analysis of data or signs and symptoms. So if you go to your doctor with a health problem, they will extract certain quantitative markers from your body in the form of blood pressure, temperature, lab testing, radiology, and other means. But they will not mention anything to you about your vitality because it's not something that's available to their analytical system. Physicians, public health experts, government officials, and research scientists have become our authorities on the body. So if we don't hear them talking about vitality, we don't think about vitality and don't think it exists. Perceiving health and vitality is its own phenomenon. If you rely on our experts to show you the way towards health, you will be waiting a very long time. You have to take the adventure yourself. It's a journey into self-knowledge. And the medium through which it happens is stillness or heightened perception. It's the adventure of discovering the life that you are and touching that breath of life that is yours. Martha Graham was a famous American dancer who helped create modern dance. She said, quote, "There is a vitality, a life force, an energy, a quickening that is translated through you into action. And because there is only one of you in all of time, this expression is unique. And if you block it, it will never exist through any other medium, and it will be lost. The world will not have it. It is not your business to determine how good it is, nor how valuable, nor how it compares with other expressions. It is your business to keep it yours clearly and directly, to keep the channel open." Keeping the channel open is not done with a crowbar. It's not done with effort and strain, tools and biohacks. It's done through stillness, by allowing the thinking mind to stop controlling and analyzing everything. Then our perceptions get heightened and expansive, and at once the invisible world comes out of the mist. Expanding our consciousness is the great human adventure. It's the story of all our fictional heroes and the great minds of our culture. It is our story. To move from the thought world of suffering to the world of heightened awareness. This is where the animating forces of nature will be waiting for us, and where they will rise up to meet us.